Hello, everyone. Welcome back to an episode of Just Say Guay. I'm your host, George Guay. Today I'm joined by Cole Pepper, who works for WJXT and covers the Jacksonville Jaguars. And we're here to talk Jaguars football. Cole, thanks for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so how has this last few months been covering the team? You got the new coach, franchise quarterback, and now Tim Tebow. How's it been?
Well, I go back to covering this team starting in their second season of 1996. And that was the first year the team made the playoffs. They made it 96, 97, 98, 99. And those were certainly the glory years. And I would say since then, the only offseason that rivals this season in any regard in terms of interest, excitement, hope, which is probably the best way to measure it, would be the 2018 and before the 2018 season when the Jaguars were coming off a AFC championship game appearance against the Patriots in a game that the Jaguars thought they should have won. There was a thought that, hey, almost everybody's back. They should be able to make another run at it. Of course, they didn't. They fell apart. And now here we are a couple of years later. But when you have the first pick in the draft and you have a new coach who has a sterling reputation in terms of winning championships on the college level, including 2 in this area at the University of Florida, things have been certainly ramped up in terms of excitement. This has been a very, very hope-filled offseason for the Jaguars. It continues to be. I think it depends on who you ask how much Tim Tebow factors into hope or otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. So let's, wind back the clocks to last season, coming into a season where, no fans, so much uncertainty if they could even pull it off. What were your expectations? Did you think they could get the number 1 pick? Because I thought the Jets were a lock.
Yeah, I thought they would be among the worst teams in the league. And then they won the opener, and everybody went, wow, well, maybe, listen, they beat the Colts, Phillip Rivers, a guy who's always been sort of a nemesis for the Jaguars. You think, well, maybe they can get something going here. Gardner Minshew seems to have a little something rolling, and then, 15 straight losses. And as the season went on, as they got to about middle of November, got toward Thanksgiving, you could see based on who was and wasn't healthy, the kinds of players they were rolling out there. I mean, there were some, again, it was an odd year to cover the NFL because, you weren't in the locker room doing interviews. You weren't traveling, covering the team. So you didn't have the same kind of familiarity, facial recognition, so to speak. But there were a couple of times where I looked out there on the field in the second quarter of a game and went, who is that guy? And you look down, you go, oh, they signed him on Tuesday. Okay, he's playing now. Okay. So, yeah, it was an odd season in a lot of ways. It certainly looked like the Jaguars were heading for the second pick about Thanksgiving time, though, until the Jets decided to find ways to win. They had found a couple of ways to keep losing earlier in the season, but then they found a couple of ways to win a couple of games, and the Jaguars wind up with that number 1 pick. And ever since really the first Jets victory gave both teams 1 win on the season, this town has been Trevor Lawrence crazy, and nothing has done anything to slow that down here in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned the fans, it got to the point when they were all in on Trevor once they tied the Jets. I think the Jets were in that position of wanting Trevor the whole year based on the personnel decisions they were making in that game against the Raiders. Did you reach a point when you were wanting in on Trevor Lawrence?
Well, listen, I saw Trevor Lawrence play as a freshman and win a national championship. And I thought, yeah, let's get Trevor Lawrence. Sure. I mean, you see a kid who can do that and has all the, the measurables and handles the pressure, is very impressive. And obviously a couple of years later now, there he is. In terms of wanting Trevor Lawrence, I mean, the Jaguars have needed a quarterback. Even when they, went to the AFC championship game in 2017 with Blake Bortles as the quarterback, you knew Bortles wasn't really the guy. Tom Coughlin gave him a contract extension and it tied things up. But the Jaguars haven't had the guy at quarterback since Mark Brunell. And that's so long ago that Brunell worked with us the last couple of years, and now he's the quarterback's coach in Detroit. So it's been a long time, and the hope is that Trevor Lawrence can be the guy for the next decade or plus in Jacksonville.
Yeah, I think he can be, and going along with one of the most successful players in college over the last decade or two. You have one of the most successful coaches coming in as well. What are your thoughts on Urban Meyer? One of the most successful college coaches of all time, but no pro experience.
He has zero pro experience, and he has had a major learning curve already this offseason. He's had a number of moments where he has, and I appreciate his candor with reporters and telling us what's been going on, but he has been, in a baptism by fire, in essence, because he's had to learn a lot of the realities of the NFL, whether it's in talent acquisition or how to handle players or coaching staffs or whatnot. But there's no doubt that he can coach the college game. It's, to me, the big question is, how does he handle an NFL locker room? Because, as a motivator, he can motivate 18, 19, 20-year-olds. And this is a fairly young team, so it may be easier for him to do that. But what happens when you have a 29-year-old, 7-year veteran who has a different opinion about how things should be done? How is Urban Meyer going to handle it? I think that's a big question mark for sure. He has brought in, coordinators who have, certainly on the offensive side, he's got a lot of brain power on the offensive side from the NFL with having both Darrell Bevell and also Brian Schottenheimer, who have both been offensive coordinators on this staff. On the defensive side, he's got Joe Cullen, who's never been a coordinator, but he's been a long-time defensive line coach in the league. And he's got Charlie Strong, who he's had as an assistant on a number of stops. So they've had a lot of opportunities to talk. So it's a learning curve. I don't expect this to be a year where the Jaguars are contending for the playoffs. I expect this is a year where they show improvement, get better, position themselves to contend in 2022. And part of that is about the players, certainly, and getting the scheme down for everybody. But part of it, too, is about Urban Meyer figuring out, what to do. And I often reference this. It's just like any other business. If you haven't been through a complete cycle, whatever that cycle is, usually it's a year, but sometimes it's different for different businesses, you don't really know what you don't know. And even then, it just gives you a once around the track kind of mentality in terms of understanding things. Urban Meyer is going to have to go through a year before he really gets, a feel for what he thinks he knows and separate that from what he needs to know.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, and those are great, realistic expectations. So, coming into the draft, all the articles I read about the Jaguars with the draft was just, get the quarterback, get Trevor Lawrence. What do you think were the other needs, and do you think they addressed them?
I thought going into the draft that both lines needed to be addressed. They did, although Urban Meyer seems to be more optimistic about the offensive line than I am. They did use their second of 2 second-round picks on Walker Little out of Stanford at offensive tackle, a guy who played only one game 2 years ago because of an injury, didn't play last year because of an opt-out, so he's only played one game in his last 2 years. But he says he's healthy, he's ready to go, so we'll see how he adapts. He could be the left tackle in the future. I thought they needed to address pass rush. They really didn't do that early in the draft. They did it late in the draft. I was surprised. The 2 guys I thought they might really take a close look at with the 25th pick of the draft and then the 33rd, late in the first and the first pick of the second, were Christian Barmore of Alabama and Azeez Ojulari from Georgia. I know both of those guys had some question marks. Ojulari, had a little bit of a medical question, and this was a tough year to get all those medical questions answered because of the way that the medical evaluations were done in the NFL. But I thought that they would spend higher picks on guys who could make a difference up front on defense and get a pass rush off the edge. And they didn't really do that early on. They take Tyson Campbell out of Georgia after picking C.J. Henderson out of Florida, cornerback last year, and signing Shaquille Griffin in the offseason. I know you have to have 3 good cover guys in the NFL. That was a bit of a surprise. I got the Travis Etienne pick, and if he had been the first pick of the second round, I don't think I would have really had the same reaction. But I think after getting Etienne at 25 and taking Campbell, is very clear that Urban Meyer wants guys who can run, and both those guys can really run. He wants speed on this team. He wants them to play fast and work fast as well. And I think that tells you an awful lot about his approach. He said he would, really would have liked to have had Kadarius Toney at that 25th pick, but he went a couple of picks before, and as Urban said, it broke his heart. So he wants guys who can, with their speed and quickness, can make a difference with the ball in their hands or stopping the guys with the ball in their hands.
Yeah, I think they made great picks. personally, I'm from New England and I'm kind of nervous about Barmore because there's been a lot of character questions. But do you think it helps Trevor Lawrence knowing that he has someone he played college with all those 4 years in the team and that familiarity?
Yeah, I think it will help him. I think it will probably help ETN more having his quarterback there. Both of these guys will be learning what life is in the NFL, no doubt. But I think it's going to be a bigger boost for ETN. Trevor Lawrence does not strike me as a guy who gets rattled by anything. So, will it help? I mean, it won't hurt. The bigger thing is if Etienne can make the kinds of plays in space that he did in college. That'll help Trevor Lawrence and everybody on this Jaguars offense. And it's very clear that when you look back at what Urban Meyer has done in the past, he likes to have those guys who can play in space, who can run the ball, who can jet sweep, throw it to him out of the backfield, line him up in a slot and let him get a mismatch. Percy Harvin, of course, is the most obvious connection there and sort of comparison. So I'm very interested to see how this offense is going to look. The Jaguars are pretty well loaded with wide receivers now, in addition to the guys they've had. They also took Jalen Camp out of Georgia Tech in the 6th round, who's a bit of a project probably, but has some great measurables, and a guy who was willing to do the dirty work at Georgia Tech before they started to open up the offense this last year or so. But trying to get enough touches on this Jaguars offense may be a trick with guys like, for a guy like Etienne, who I think is going to get a lot of attention, finding different ways to get him the ball. And that doesn't even address the tight end position, does it?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of, moving parts, but I think when it comes together, it's going to work really well. So, my two factors, I think they're going to help Trevor Lawrence. One of them, I think, having the full off season, something that Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert didn't have last season. And do you think it's better off for Trevor that he's in a market like Jacksonville? Because, if he went to the Jets, I think that's a tough media to deal with as the number one pick.
I think it's a tough media to deal with regardless of the pick, quite honestly. You can ask Sam Darnold how it was being, a high pick in the draft. Again, Lawrence to me is not a guy who is going to be affected by a lot of that stuff. And I thought it was interesting. Peter King interviewed Lawrence here in Jacksonville right after the draft and said, I think it'd be better because you went to college in a small town. Well, I mean, listen, 95% of the kids in the draft went to colleges in smaller towns, right? I mean, Tuscaloosa, Alabama is not a big city. Gainesville, Florida is not a big city. So you get a lot of these places that guys who have been in smaller schools or smaller towns, big schools in small towns. And in some regard, being in Jacksonville, it's not so much about how tough the media is. The difference in New York and Jacksonville is that in Jacksonville, it's the only game in town. It's the only major league sport in town. It gets covered and year round. So that makes it a little bit different. There have been guys who have played here who say that makes it more difficult than in New York, where once the football season is over, you're looking at the NBA and you're looking at Major League Baseball and you're looking at the NHL and so forth. So I'm not sure everybody's had that experience, but I don't think that's going to be an issue for Trevor Lawrence. If he does what everybody on the planet seems like to think he can do, he'll be fine.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't even think about that. That it's not just being the number one pick, but being in a city where it's the city's team. So if Deshaun Watson does stay in Houston, for how long, given until they trade him or his situation settles out, how exciting will the QB battles be in the AFC South? Yeah,
I mean, start looking at how you would rank these guys right now. Obviously, you put Lawrence because he's a rookie, hasn't taken a snap in the NFL at the bottom. But expectations wise, Carson Wentz, does he regain his kind of form? Tannehill's been terrific, kind of reborn in Nashville in many ways. We'll see how much longer he can sustain that as the years start to pile up, on him. And we know how good Deshaun Watson is when he's playing at his best. So I think this is going to be a very good quarterback league. And I also think that's one of the reasons why when we start to look at the draft picks in this division, I think there was some influence of thinking, all right, well, we've got to play against Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson and Carson Wentz, whatever. So you saw a lot of pass rush and pass coverage picks made within this division. during the draft. So I think Trevor Lawrence has already made a little bit of an impact on what other teams are thinking.
Yeah, it's a great way to look at it. I didn't even think about that. So you had the top college player of the last decade go to the Jaguars. You had one of the top coaches just go to the Jaguars. Now you have arguably the best college player of all time going to the Jaguars, different position. What are your thoughts on Tim Tebow?
Well, okay. So again, remember, Tim is from Jacksonville. So this has been a dream of a lot of Jaguars fans for a long time. He led Nice High School to the state championship 16 years ago. And people thought, well, maybe one day he could be the Jaguars quarterback. When he came out in the draft in 2010, the Jaguars had the 10th pick in the draft, and there were a lot of Jaguars fans. I'd say it was about a 50-50 split. Jaguars fans who wanted the Jags to draft Tebow. Some wanted him to draft him at any cost. Some thought if he lasted until the second round, which he did not, because the Broncos, of course, took him at 25. But it's a bit of a divisive thing among Jaguars fans right now. I think I don't have high expectations for his performance at the position. And I think this bears a little conversation. He'll be 34 years old when the season begins. I'm sure he's in good shape because he's been a professional athlete and he's a guy who always keeps himself in good shape. But he's not in football shape. He hadn't played in a football game in over 8 years. So he's got to get in shape to play football. He's got to learn a new position, which is rare to do at that age. He did play a little bit of tight end as a freshman in high school. So that tells you how long ago that was. And I don't think Urban Meyer can cut it. And I don't mean from a public perception standpoint. Urban and Tim's relationship is almost like a second father kind of relationship. Mm-hmm. I can't imagine Urban Meyer cutting Tim Tebow if he signs him, which now looks like he's going to do. So I think he's going to be on this team. Again, if they need a pass catching tight end, why not find somebody who's played the position? And Tebow, it's not like Tebow was a sudden runner. He was a power runner as a quarterback. So I don't think he's the guy who's going to threaten down the field all that much. So I just think it's an odd decision to be made here. The other question I have about this is how will the players in the locker room respond to this? Because I can tell you that a lot of them are going to think this guy didn't earn it. Whatever he did in the NFL, in the college, whatever he did in minor league baseball, doesn't matter. How did he earn a spot on, to compete in training camp? And now he'll have a chance in training camp to showcase himself. And if he does surprise me and do better than I expect, then he'll earn a lot of respect in the locker room. His work ethic, his determination, his enthusiasm, all that'll be great. But how do other players respond to him, particularly players who may feel like they're losing out on reps because Urban brought in his favorite player of all time?
Yeah, that makes sense. And, I'm just happy he's back in football, whatever capacity it is, because, he played for the Syracuse Mets. And so I went to Providence College in Rhode Island, and Pawtucket is the next town over. And I went to see the Mets play when they came to town, Tebow's batting. And I'm just thinking, my goodness, wow. I think 10 years ago when he was tearing it up at Florida, I didn't expect him to be playing baseball. I'm just happy he's back with football. But could you expect him getting like some sort of locker room role, like leadership? I don't know, because I try and think of Cam Newton last year with the Patriots. How he wasn't the best player in the team by any means, but he was able to rally the locker room around him.
It's very hard to lead if you're not performing on the field in the National Football League. Because every single one of those other 52 guys on the active roster know that if you're not contributing, you're not helping them. So you can be a good soldier, but to be a leader in a locker room, it's more than just about being a good person in the National Football League. This is a business. Those are 53 businesses all operating under the same roof. And if you're not helping their business, guys don't really care what you have to say, quite honestly. So, again, it is a young team. He will be a veteran. He's been 3 years in the NFL, and at 33, 34 years old, he'll be an older voice in the locker room. So there may be some of that, but you got to perform. I mean, he certainly won't be a detraction based on the way he behaves. He'll either be a small positive or he'll be a big positive if he plays and surprises everybody. And becomes a real, factor on the team. But other people can make him a detraction based on how they view, his presence on the team and in the locker room.
Yeah, for sure. And my last question about this, it's in regards to you. How excited will you be when, you can finally go back into the stadium this fall? I think it's going to be full capacity. It seems like. How special will that be?
Well, I'll be looking forward to it quite a bit. Absolutely. I will say that, and you've probably read and seen some coverage of how things have been going in Florida. We've had a little more of an opened sort of economy, and some things have been a little more opened up here than in some other parts of the country. So throughout the course of the spring, things have gotten a little easier in terms of dealing with the pandemic. But I missed so much being in the locker room, being able to talk to guys, whether it's coworkers or whatever else. When we had the draft coverage, we had a media workroom. Just to sit in that media workroom in the stadium and have that interchange with other reporters was something I really missed. So I'm glad we can see the light at the end of the tunnel on this thing for sure. Well,
Cole, thanks for coming on my show. Best of luck with this season with the Jaguars, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks, George. I appreciate it.
Yep. Have a good one.